Okay, hello, back rack number 2. 3! Wow. We are getting more back racks by the minute. Okay, so that's 3. Oshia etamecha varachet nachotecha ureim benasim. All right. So we're at benasim. We need 2 more. But we might start the service without it because there's actually nothing that we're doing yet that requires a minyan anyway, and I want to get started. So let's do that. Let's start. Ashrei can be found on page 214 in the Lev Shalem, 558 in the 1-volume Slim Shalom, 226 in the Sim Shalom, to the special Nusach for Shabbat afternoon. Ashrei Oshvei Beitecha Od Yahalu Chasela Ashrei Shekach Lo Ashrei Shadonai Elohav Tihila LeDavid Aromim Chadlo Ayamelach V'Chashim Chala B'Choyim B'Berachek V'Lashim Chala Gdol. Tzadik Ana B'Chol Daracha V'Chasid B'Chol Ma'asav Tilat Adonai daber pi bivarech kol basar shem kocho leolam ba'ed Banachnu barech ya mi'atav olam Hallelujah Ba'al Tzion goel Shavei feshav Yaakov niyum Adonai V'nizor b'tiyot tamamar Onai ruchi asher lecha V'dvarai asher samta b'picha le'mushum bicha Mipi zaracham b'zera zaracham atam V'yata kadosh yoshev til Yisrael V'karzel zev yamar Kadosh 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 Adonai tzvum chol haaretz kevodo V'tiseini ruach v'shmach harai kol rash gadol Baruch v'Adonai mimkomo Adonai yimloch leolam voed. Adonai Hashem Melech Yaneinu v'yom koreinu Baruch hu Eloheinu shebaranu lichvodo v'idlan minatoim v'natan lanu Torah emet. V'yivtuchu v'chayodei shemecha Kilo azavta dorshecha Adonai Adonai chavetz l'man tzidko Yagdil Torah v'ya'adir. We're going to begin reading Parshat Ekev. You can find it in the Red Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 1037 if you're reading it out of just a standard Bible. We are in the 7th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, verse 12, chapter 7, verse 12. If you're in the back of the Slim Shalom, it's on page 929. We're going to be focusing our learning a little bit on a verse that comes later. The parsha itself is named after that word Ekev, which kind of means on the heels of. It's a sort of a conditional word. You have that as the root of the name Yaakov, Jacob, because he came out holding onto the heels of Esav. But here it doesn't have to do with heel like a body part. It has to do, well, at least in the Pshat, has to do with it's like an if-then, Ekev. I guess you could turn it into the English idiom. On the heels of your listening to these rules, then God will give you the things that you're looking for. Rashi quotes a famous midrash on this, that the reason why the word Ekev is used when it could have been in many other words is that even those mitzvot, that your Ekev, your ankle, your heel, is liable to trample over because you think they're insignificant, you think they're small or banal. It's those small mitzvot, those small sacred actions that actually are the things that make the difference in the world. So specifically focus not just on the big ones, but on the small ones. I'll read Ekev for us in 3 parts. V'haya Ekev tishma'un et hamishpatim ha'eleh u'shmartem v'asitem otam v'shamar Adonai Elohecha lecha et habrit v'et hachesed asher nishba la'avotecha V'ahei v'cha u'verachacha v'hirbecha u'verach privitnecha u'friad matecha deganecha v'tiroshecha v'yitzarecha shagar alafecha v'yashtarot tzonecha al ha'adama asher nishba lavotecha latelach baruch tiyeh mikol amim lo yeh v'cha akar v'akara u'vivimtecha V'hesir Adonai Yimcha kol choli v'chol madvei Mitzrayim haraim asher yadata lo yisimein bach unetanam bechol sonecha beachatat kol amim asher Elohecha noten lach lo tachos encha alehem velo tavod et Elohem ki mokeshu lach ki tomar bilvavecha rabim hagoyim ha'ela mimeni eicha ucha lahorisham lo tira mehem zachor tizkor et asher asa Adonai Elohecha lefaro l'chol Mitzrayim hamasot hagdolot asher ra'u einecha v'haotod v'hamoftim v'hayad hachazaka v'hazeroa hanetuya asher hotziacha Adonai Elohecha ken ya'aseh Adonai Elohecha l'chol amim asher ata yarei mipnehem v'gam et hatzira Yishalach Adonai Elohecha bam adavod hanisharim v'hanistarim mipanecha lo tarotz mipnehem ki Adonai Elohecha bekirbecha el gadol v'norah. Second Aliyah, continuing God's promise to dislodge all the nasty stuff from in front of you if you follow the commandments, and to hurl those nasty things at you if you don't follow them. A challenging theology, of course, doesn't necessarily bear itself out in our understanding of reality, but a key component of this early infantile Israelite theology and the relationship with the Master. Menashal Adonai Elohecha et hagoyim ha'el mipanecha ma'at ma'at lo tuchal kalotah maher pentir be'alecha chayat hasadeh unetanam Adonai Elohecha lefanecha v'hamam mehuma hagedula ad hishamedam v'natan malchahem biyadecha v'havata et shemam mitachat hashamayim lo yidyat vish bifanecha ad hishmidecha otam Pesilei Eloheim tisrafun ba'esh lo tachmod kesef v'zahav alehem v'lakachta lach pein tivakesh bo ki toavat Adonai Elohecha hu. That's the verse we're going to be looking at a little bit later, the one I just read, so if you want to linger on it in your mind. V'lo tavi toeva el beitacha v'ayita cherem kamohu shaketz tishaketzeinu v'ta'ev t'ta'avenu ki cherem hu kol ha'mitzvah Asher anochi mitzavecha hayom tishbrun lasod leman tichiyun uritem ubatem virishtem et haaretz asher nishba Adonai lavotechem v'zachartat kol haderech asher holichecha Adonai Elohecha ze 40 shana bamidbar leman anotecha lenasotecha ladat et asher bilvavecha hatishmor mitzvotav imlo vayanacha vayarivecha vayachilcha taman asher lo yadata v'lo yad'un avotecha leman hodiacha ki lo ala lechem levado yichyeh hadam ki al kol motzafi Adonai yichyeh adam. We heard that's another relatively uncommon trup formation, a darga, da 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 da, into a tavir, and then into another tavir. Sometimes I wonder, first of all, I'm having this conversation with everybody, but particularly with Rick, because we go back and forth on trup drashes. I wonder if sometimes it's just a question of meter, and as the music was kind of being overlay onto the basic structure of a sentence, if there are more syllables that were needed, or that was expected, they just had to add in an extra tavir. Or it's there's something about that particular piece of music on that word that we're supposed to be thinking about. It's hard to know. Rick, you have a thought? I'm not putting you on the spot, but you have a thought? He does. Rick, if you want to unmute.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, they could have chosen any trope to put there. It's not just the rhythm. I don't think. I mean, they could have done the whole sentence differently. So
true, right?
You
don't just think of it as a filler.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Not in that case. Then they would just do have a mircha or a munach, but to actually put a trope on it, they want you to do something with it. It's there to be done with.
Asher holichacha, God who brought you out. Adonai, the Lord, Elohecha, your God. Then another one, Zeh,
Yeah.
those 40 years in the desert. And right, and it's on a nothing word, on the word Zeh. It's to emphasize the word Zeh.
Moses was a Zeh.
Moses was a Zeh, that's true.
The baby was a Zeh.
Verse 4 in chapter 8 of Dvarim, page 1040, verse 4. Simlatecha lo balata me'alecha beraglecha lo batseka ze arbaim shana v'yadata im levavecha ki kasher yaser ish et beno Adonai Elohecha miyasreka v'shamarta ad mitzvot Adonai Elohecha lalecha b'drachav u'liyira oto Ki Adonai Elohecha meviacha el eretz tova eretz nachale mayim Aino tu tomot yotzim babika uvahar eretz chita usora v'gefen utena v'rimon eretz zeit shemen udvash eretz asher lo b'miskenut tochal ba lechem lo techzar kol ba eretz asher avnei varzel u'mehareh tachtzov nechoshet v'yachalta v'savata uberachta Adonai Elohecha ala aretz hatova asher natan lach. The source of Birkat HaMazon, v'yachalta, you shall eat, v'savata, and you shall be satisfied, uberachta, and you shall bless. Interestingly, the notion of saying a blessing before you eat is not considered a doraita mitzvah, a mitzvah that comes from the Torah. That the rabbis added on later. The only thing the Torah commanded you to do was to say thank you after the fact, after you have been sated. But to say thank you before you've been sated is an extra level of piety. It's one thing to say, I've got everything I need, my belly is full, thank you. It's quite another thing to start with gratitude. I have no idea if what I'm about to eat is going to be enough. Still, I bless God for it. Okay, so that's the Torah reading for the first Aliyah of Akev. Hopefully, those of you who are here with us were able to download the text sheet that I'm going to be using. It came in yesterday's email, and as usual, the more I've thought about the text I want to bring, the less I realize we're going to have a chance to get through all of it because it's such weighty material. This will be a little bit familiar to Lori because I used this as an anchor of my meditation on Friday afternoon, the Friday meditation at noon that she was a part of, where we meditated on the word covet, C-O-V-E-T, and our interesting relationship with the word covet as traditional Jews and modern American capitalists. And that's not a political statement. I suppose there might be people on this call who have a different relationship with capitalism, but we are living in a capitalist society. We even have an economist with us, and he can talk to us how significant coveting is to drive the capitalist engine, right? On the one hand, you've confronted this paradigm or paradox in your own mind, and I've even spoken about it at different times. On the one hand, it's a good thing not to want that which you don't have. From the Buddhist perspective, wanting what you don't have is the source of all suffering. Wanting in general is the source of all suffering. You even hear that in the way that word is sometimes used in English, right? We say the word to want as desire, but the word want also means to lack, right? So to want is to have an emotional reaction to that which you don't have, forcing you to desire it, right? And the Buddhist stance would say the more you can eliminate that from your consciousness, the more peace you will have, right? It's the simplest expression of it is, I want that over there. That's what I want. I see it. I like it. Looks beautiful. Looks tasty. I want it. But I have this. This is what I have. I want that. But I have this. And the gap between that and this is a source of most of human suffering, according to the Buddhists. And Judaism also has a concern about coveting. It makes the top 10. It not only makes the top 10 in Parshat Hanan that we saw this morning, and also in the original 10 in Parshat Yitro, it makes a return engagement in Parshat Akev that we're going to go into a little bit deeper. But it's hard not to covet. What would drive us to create and to earn? What would be some of the joy and the spice of life if we didn't want to satisfy our children's covetousness Is there a benign covetousness? Just to want something because it could be nice. Is that sinful every single time? What are the contours of coveting that turn it from the natural way of being human to sinfulness? We get some clues to it in Parshat Akev when coveting is linked not just to a thing, but to the Torah's worst sin, which is idolatry, right? Some people believe that the best way to read the Torah is it's a revolution against idolatry. Everything else is commentary. Story of Moses, great. What this book is a revolution against the notion that individual objects can have divine power. Priyant, are you raising your hand or just flexing your muscle? Flexing, okay. This should be interactive, folks, or it can be. It doesn't have to be, but I have plenty to say, but please pipe in if you want to. I can't do it as nimbly as when I teach my Rashi class because I'm not the one controlling the computer. Kenji might be even able to. I trust this group. You can let them all unmute as they wish so that you don't have to individually unmute them. So if you want to change that setting, Kenji, so that they can all unmute, I'm totally fine with that. Look at chapter 7, verse 25, the verse that we read a little bit ago, and you have it on your source sheet. In dealing with the warning against violating the commandments, we have this verse. Pisilei Elohehem, the statues of their gods. I love the way the Torah, by the way, both negates the concept that there are other gods and still gives them the term gods, right? It doesn't say they're statues. The statues of their gods. Almost as if to say that those gods exist in their minds. They're not real, but we're gonna give it the word Eloah. The statues of their gods. Tisrafun ba'esh. You got to burn them in fire. Lo tachmod, same root as our 10th commandment. Don't covet, don't want, don't desire, don't think of them as beautiful, don't think of them as sexy, don't let your eyes go astray. Lo tatu ruach harei levavchem. This is letting your eyes go astray. What should you not covet? Kesef, the silver, vizahav, and the gold upon them. Right? It's as if the Torah is saying, it's not that I, God, think that you're going to think that the statue itself is so wonderful, but they're going to gild it. They're going to make the prohibited thing look so good to you, like the Snickers bar in the checkout aisle of a supermarket, right? The marketers who know exactly how to take the thing that you probably shouldn't have and make it irresistible to your children, and maybe even to you. V'lakachtalach. We'll come back to those words again in terms of what the force of those two words are in the verse. We know what the words mean. It's very simple Hebrew. V'lakachta, and you will take lach for yourself. But how is it operating in the sentence? Right? Don't desire the silver and the gold upon them. V'lakachtalach. Does that mean lest you? Don't desire it lest you take them? Or, as we're going to hear later, is this kind of continuing the way the sin is done? Don't take them. Don't desire them. For when you take them, that's when they become problematic. Might the Torah be telling us here that the problematic nature is not the desiring itself, but the desiring that leads to the taking? Very hard to legislate a feeling, right? Tell yourself not to want something. It's extremely hard. Great phrase here. Pain, in our favorite trip of the day, a yativ. Pain, lest tivakesh bo. That you, this is a great word, tivakesh, it's a nifal. Let you become ensnared with it. You might know the Hebrew noun mokesh. A mokesh is a snare. This is the verb form, to be ensnared. Lest you be ensnared in it. Ki to'evat Adonai Elohecha hu. Because it is a abhorrent thing. Or as Rabbi Riskin likes to say about the word to'eva, it's quoting the Talmud, to'e ataba. What does the word to'eva mean? He takes it away from the root, meaning a disgusting thing, and he turns it into a nochikun. Not he, the Talmud, nochikun, where you take a word and you divide it into two parts, which is clearly not how it was built, but you derive more meaning from it. To'e ataba. You make a mistake in it. You think you want it, but you don't. It slightly degrossifies those things that are called to'evot in the Torah, that Talmudic reading. It's not that it's like inherently disgusting. It's just that you made a mistake. To'e ataba. Okay. Look at the text sheet. I'm going to read each word of the text sheet because I'm not sure everyone has it. First, the way halacha defines what's going on here. So halacha, Jewish law, first appears on the scene in the Mishnah and in the Midrash halacha around the same time, somewhere in the first and second century CE. And this is Mishnah Avodah Zarah, the entire tractate that deals with idolatry. I'll read parts of it. Hagoyim haavdim teharim v'tagvaot. Those nations that worship mountains and hills, right? Not just idols, but they were cultures that actually considered certain natural formations to be divine in of itself. Which, by the way, a piece of me gets. If there's any piece of me that sees God in the world, I see it in a mountain much more than I see it in something that's human-made, right? So it almost actually connects with our theology, except that we think of it not as the divine itself, but as the creation of the divine. But you can understand why an ancient and why a modern, seeing a pristine view of something beautiful in the world, would say, if there's something bigger than us, that's what it is. Hein mutarin. If you come upon a hill and you find out that there is a local tribe of idolaters who worship the hill itself, you can still walk on the hill. We're not prohibiting the hill itself. Umash alehem asurim. But if there's anything that's upon the hill, that becomes prohibited once an idolater has bowed down to it. Shenamar, as it says, from our verse, Devarim 7, Lo tachmo, don't desire kesef v'zahav alehem. Don't have the desire for the special silvery and gold things upon them, v'lakachta, and you take them. Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Haglili said, Elohehem al heharim. It says their gods on the mountains. V'lo heharim Elohehem. It doesn't say that their gods are the mountains, or that the mountains are their gods. Elohehem al hagvaot. Their gods on the hills. V'lo hagvaot Elohehem. It does not say that the hills are their gods themselves. Okay, leave that aside for the moment. Halachically, what we are trying to learn from our verse that links the notion of idolatry with the notion of coveting, is that you're coming in a natural place, you're taken by the beauty, you're allowed to walk there even though a local tribe has deemed it sacred, but if you come upon something that they made there, that is humanly produced in some way, and the rest of the Mishnah defines just how little a human has to have worked at it in order for it to become an idol, that you can have nothing to do with, and don't be tempted by that beautiful silver gold idol. Okay, go to the next source, Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaMitzvot. Sefer HaMitzvot is the list of the commandments, the 248 positive and the 365 negative ones by the, anyone know who wrote Sefer HaMitzvot? By the Rambam, Maimonides. Right, so in addition to Moreh Nebuchim, his philosophical treatise on Jewish thought, and his commentary on the Mishnah, and his Yad HaChazakah, his Mishnah Torah, his Code of Jewish Law, he also wrote out all the mitzvot, right, the way he counted them. And there was a machloket that they didn't actually have directly because they didn't live at the same time between Maimonides and Nachmanides, the Rambam and the Ramban, who lived about 100, 150 years apart, as to, they all agreed there was 613, because that's a Talmudic concept. They didn't agree exactly how to count each of them. This is Maimonides counting on the mitzvot. This is, thou shalt not, number 22. Shehizharnu shelo lehanot petach shitin. That God warned us not to derive any benefit from their adornments. Sheyikashtu behen lavodah zarah. That they would have adorned themselves for idolatry, right? Anything, a special bracelet or a headband or even a garment that they might have worn in the service of idolatry, don't derive any benefit from it. Vehu amru yiparach lo tachmod. And it's from what God, the Holy One, said, lo tachmod, do not desire, kesef v'zahav alehem. Don't desire the silver and gold upon them. Ubesifrei, and in the Midrashic collection called the Sifrei, bi'er shetzipui ne'evad. Even the outer covering, even if it's just the outer covering that gets worshipped, asur, it's prohibited. Prohibited to have any relationship with it as a Jew. V'samchu oto be'amru yitbarach, and they linked that mitzvah on the fact that it says, lo tachmo, don't be drawn in by that beautiful silver covering. So in halachic literature, what we're being taught here is there's something about idolatry that's supposed to catch your eye, or even if it's not supposed to, it might, and you have to resist the urge lest you be ensnared by it. Okay. But there's something deeper, I believe, in these verses that is brought out by the next two sources. That what's going on here is not just another stay away from multiple gods, but there's something psychological, which I know is an anachronism when you think about ancient texts, in terms of how the mind operates. Right? To think of it psychologically is anachronism, except that the human mind has always been something that operated along the way we now understand as psychology. To think of it psychologically is anachronism, but human beings acting psychologically, not so. Rabbi Ovadia Sforno, 15th century commentator on the Torah, on our verse, chapter 7, verse 25. Pain tivakesh bo. Pain tivakesh bo, lest you become ensnared in it. Look at what he says here. Shalifamim. Sometimes it happens. Yikre. Shetatzliach ba'oto kesef v'zahav she'alehem. What's the situation? You come by an idol. You're not attracted to the idol as an idol itself. Why? Because you fear God. You're an Israelite. You're a Hebrew. But it was so shiny, you couldn't resist yourself. So you somehow held on to or grasped, maybe even took possession of the silver, gold, and you became successful. Either because you sold it at a profit or the next day a deal came through. What's the problem? Shetachshov shahaya ze bechoach ota ha'avodat gilulim shayu aleha. The problem is that it's a two-stepper. It's not just that it's not a problem to think that gold is beautiful. I happen to think the fact that human beings think gold and silver and diamonds are beautiful is nuts. The economics of what human beings are willing to spend for a tiny little rock that someone else says is worth a lot, I think is a deep wound in the human psyche. But it's a common thing to find something beautiful attractive. The problem, according to Sforno, is not your human desire to covet in and of itself. It's that when you covet it and take it, and then something good happens to you, that might lead you to believe that the thing that happened to you positively happened as a result of the idol upon which the gold and silver was. It's leading you down an anti-monotheistic pathway. It starts with coveting. It starts with saying, look how beautiful that is. It ends with saying, maybe my knife should not be submitted to the one who created the world. Maybe I should believe more in the power of these idols as my neighbors do. And that's when we get pulled away from the core identity of what it means to be a God-fearing Jew. Look at the last source, Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch is another medieval accounting of each of the 613 commandments. It's of ambiguous attribution. We don't really know who wrote it, but it appears, and it's a beloved book because it enumerates all the 613 mitzvot, and it gives you all the laws surrounding them. So, Sefer HaChinuch, number 38. Shalo lachmod, not to desire, to covet. Shalo laha'alot b'machshavatenu, don't even let it arise into our thoughts. Lasot tachpula, to do some kind of a plot. Lakachat lanu, to take something for us. Mashahu lezulatenu me'achenu, something that belongs to someone else. The Sefer HaChinuch is focusing not on the idolatrous part of it, but the conniving part. The problem with coveting is that once you want something, it's very hard to convince yourself that you don't want it. And if you can't convince yourself you don't want it, then you might convince yourself to get it either in appropriate ways or inappropriate ways. I love the phrase, lahalot b'machshavatenu, to let it arise in our thoughts. Once it arises, it's very hard to descend. That we'll do some kind of a plot to take it. Shenemar, because it says, this is the Yitro version, not the Va'etchanan version. Lo tachmot beidreacha. The basic prohibition comes from the Yitro version of the Ten Commandments. Do not desire the house of your fellow. And our sages already proved, where in the collection of Midrash called the Mechilta, mi pasuk acher, from a different verse. Which verse? Our verse. In chapter 7 of Dvarim, Dichtiv, Lo tachmod, etc., don't desire, vilakachtalach. The problem of chemda is that desiring it leads you to taking it, and leads you to taking it potentially against the person's will. Sha'asur lav de lo tachmod, the negative commandment of do not desire, do not covet, eino nigmar, does not get completed ad sheyaseh bo ma'aseh, until you do an act with it. This, by the way, I hope I can explain this well. This concept is both lechumra and lakula. It both actually brings out a stringency and a leniency in the law. The leniency is that you're not liable. You haven't violated the commandment according to Deuteronomy's version of it until you've desired and taken, because it's understood as a double. Lo tachmod v'lakachtalach. What I like about this is that it decriminalizes the desire itself. I desire that Ferrari, but I can't afford it, and I certainly am not going to steal it. I haven't violated any rule. Lo tachmod v'lakachtalach. It's not until you desire and you take it in a way that you shouldn't have that you become liable. So that's the leniency. But the stringency is in the concept, because once you are in the mode of chemda, of desiring something, you are liable to create a pretense that will allow you, an otherwise ethical person, to take it for yourself. So it operates as a halachic leniency. You're not liable for lashes or something until you actually act on it, but a conceptual stringency. Watch out from the first whispers of desire. Even if you ultimately paid for this thing that you desired from your friend, over gam kain alav telo tachmod, you still have violated the prohibition of do not desire. She'ein lav de lo tachmod, the thou shalt not, the negative commandment de lo tachmod, lo nitkan, is not fixed. Benitinat hadamim is not fixed by giving money. Kol zman shederech hechrech lakacho mimenu. If at any point in the process you were less than above board, if you convinced somebody to get rid of something you didn't want to get rid of, if you used any pressure whatsoever, the pressure that was fueled by your unrelenting desire for it, even if you paid a fair price for it, you still have violated the rule. Kain hu haperush ha'amiti l'rabbeinu zal, and that is the true understanding of the mitzvah. So much we could say about this. What I want to pull back and conclude with, and then see if anybody has any comments, is as follows. I believe, even though the Torah mentions in two versions of the Ten Commandments, and also in our parsha, linking the Ten Commandments, linking coveting with idolatry, even though we've got it in our top 10 and linked to the most pernicious of our sins, suggesting that it's a powerful no-no, and it is, I believe the Torah understands how impossible it is to legislate someone to not want something that they want. And so halachically, the rabbis made it harder to violate, because in order to violate it, you actually have to act on it, and act on it in a way that is wanton and violates the other person's own sense of what they own. But the rabbis also warned us in this construct that even though you can't totally eliminate that concept from entering into your mind, it is a powerful, sacred, and divine thing. Every time you recognize you're coveting something that you shouldn't covet, you resist the urge, and don't be ensnared by the type of coveting that leads to true sinfulness. And what is the true sinfulness? One of the true sinfulnesses is leading you to take something against their will. And the other true sinfulness, according to Sforno, is that it will divert you from the system of beliefs that you hold dear, and start having you believe that the thing itself, that shiny thing that you caught your eye, has power over you. And once you think that things have power over you, they do. And they do become your gods. And that is idolatry. And we are all guilty of it. Guilty as charged. How many things in my life are shiny and beautiful and so beautifully useful do I give my power over to, including, by the way, in this very moment, like Zoom? Is Zoom not a god to us on some level? It's our conduit to God right now. How do we figure out a way to have a relationship with things that are new and wonderful, that still keep us grounded to the only thing we should be worshiping, which is the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, blessed be She. That's my little discursus on coveting. I'm open to comments or thoughts, and we can also just close this up and go straight into Mariv. Comments, thoughts, reactions.
Didn't Jimmy Carter say in a Playboy interview that he coveted other women in his heart, but he never actually committed adultery?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
There's natural coveting that takes place on human behavior, but it's our ability to refrain from acting on it. That's the human, task.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that the Haredim are truly outrageous when they take the the keeping themselves from licentiousness to such an extreme that they avert their eyes when a woman walks by, and they, I think, frankly, fetishize the female body. But they fetishize it in the negative, and they would say that it's their way of not even allowing, like the Sefer HaChinuch says, a thought to enter into their mind that might be a lewd thought that might push them to act on it. I think that they're nuts. But I think they also get something about the human condition, right? That it is very hard once you have desire to resist it. And I would agree with Jimmy Carter that my theology is like Jimmy's, which is that adultery of the heart can lead to adultery of the flesh, but it isn't adultery.
Yeah.
Because
Jimmy Carter said he lusted in his heart.
he lusted in his heart.
Yeah. That wasn't no. So that was not exactly as coveted.
Right. Well, but they're similar. It's
Exactly.
the covetousness of the loins, as it were. Any other comments, Marshall? Please.
I know the verb is lo tachmod, but I was just remembering the Zemer of Shabbat, Baruch El Elyon, where we have a different use of the word, the Shoresh Chet Nem Dalet, Chemdat Hayamin Kara'o Elitzur.
Right.
That which is most desirable is, my God called it.
Right.
So
right.
it's a beautiful way of transforming what we're seeing here is sort of a great sin of covetousness to turning it into a beautiful thing.
Right. And in modern Hebrew, for sure, chamud, you're so cute, right? A baby or a beloved, right? To call something chamud is something that's awakening like a love and a desire in me, which is a positive thing, right? We do have a relationship with our desires, fueled and funneled in the right direction, that are quite positive. We are not ascetics, right? We are not Buddhist monks. We can learn something from them, but we aren't them. And those of us on this call, we live in a modern Western society, and we expose ourselves to beautiful things and beautiful people, which means that we're exposing our desires, which means it's actually, I think, harder for us to observe these mitzvot than it might have been to the Israelites in the desert. How many things did they see that were so enticing to the eyes, and still they were enjoined not to do them? Last comment? Anyone? Okay. Well, I wish you a week of natural but also controllable coveting that keeps you in the relationship with the people and the things that you most want to be in with. We'll move to Mariv. We'll do a quick Mariv. I know that some of you want to also get to the Zoom out that Rabbi Schatz and Rabbi Chorny are going to be leading. Do we have Minyan? I forgot to do Kaddish at Mincha, but I don't even know if we have... I never even finished Mincha, did I? Oh, I feel so silly. I never did Aleinu or Mincha. Hopefully some of you did Aleinu on your own. I feel bad about that. I was so excited to study this material with you that I never did Aleinu and finish up Mincha. So it's now pretty much too late to do anything called Mincha. So let's do Mariv, and I promise you you'll get an Aleinu and a Kaddish there if we are indeed a Minyan. So the Mariv begins... I don't have my cheat sheet, so I'm actually have to find the pages. Page 264 in the Lev Shalem. Page, I think, 200 in the one-volume Slim Shalom. And I think it's page... Sorry, everybody. I know this is annoying.
Rabbi, excuse me. We were late, but did you do the Amida for Mincha?
What's that?
Did you do the Amida for Mincha?
Yes.
Okay.
We did not? Did I have such a mental break? We never did the Amidah for Mincha? I went straight from the Torah reading to the I I had so much desire to teach the Torah to you that I totally skipped over the Amidah. I am really sorry about that. It is now really too late to do the Mincha Amidah. If you want to be particular about it, one would say that if you miss an Amidah, not wantonly, not because you didn't want to do it, but because you forgot or you didn't have time, then you say the next Amidah twice. It is a harder thing when you're going from an Amidah that you missed being Shabbat to the Amidah that you're going to say, which is not Shabbat. Like if you miss Mincha on a Wednesday evening, then you say the Amidah twice for Mariv. It's not as clear that you say the Saturday night Amidah twice for having missed Shabbat Mincha Amidah, but if you would like to do that, you certainly may. It's called Tashlumim, filling in something that you mixed, and I am so sorry to you and to the Holy One that I totally skipped over it. But now let's go to Mariv because Mincha slot is over. And the Mariv, the pages I announced, again, it's 264 in the Lev Shalem, 200 in the one volume Sim Shalom, and 281 in the Slim Shalom. Behurachum yichaper avon b'lo yashchid v'hirbal hashiva pov lo yirkol chamato Adonai Hashem melech yaneinu v'yom koreinu Baruch atah l'machol masher bedrorarim El chai v'kayam tamidim lo chaleinu le'olam v'ed Baruch atah Adonai ma'ariv aravim Ve'avatcha al tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael El Melech Ne'aman Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Mi'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim ani Adonai Elohechem emed ve'emunah kol zeh v'kayam aleinu ki yu Adonai Eloheinu l'tovanu. U'malchuto bratzon kiblu aleihem Moshe v'nei Yisrael lachanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru chulam Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nadar ba'kodesh, nora tilot osefela, malchutecha ruvanecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe, ze eli anu v'yamru, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed, v'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov, u'galo miyad chazak mimenu, baruch ata Adonai, ga'al Yisrael, hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom amdin malkin. Ushmor tzeitenu uvaweinu l'chaim u'shalom yatav yad olam baruch atah Adonai shomer hamo Yisrael ad baruch Adonai le'olam amen v'amen. Ki amalchut shelcha hi ula'ol me'ad timloch b'chavod ki en lana melech ela ata baruch ata Adonai hamelech b'chvodo tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed v'al kol ma'asav. The Amidah begins on the next page. Make sure to add in the inclusions for the end of Shabbat. And again, my apologies that we never did together the Amidah for Mincha. If you're still davening, please continue at your own pace. We continue with Vihi Noam, 279 in the red Liv Shalem, 684 in the one-volume Sim Shalom, 292 in the Slim Shalom. Vihi Noam Adonai Eloheinu Leinu Maseh Yadenu Kon Leinu Maseh Yadeinu Konenehu Yoshe B'Seid Zolom Etzel Shaddai Yilo Nana Mar Lada Machzud. רק בעיניך תביט ושילומת רשעים תראה כי אתה אדוני מחסי עליון שמת מניך לא תניך לך רעה ונגע לא יקרא ביוהה לך כי מלאך ויצב לך ישפוך בו. יקרני ועיניהו מוינוכי וצרח על צב יחד דיורח מיספייהו וירא בישועתי אורך ימי מספייהו ויראהו בישועתי. We'll go directly to Aleinu, which is on page 281 in the Lev Shalem, 297 in the Slim Shalom, and in the one-volume Sim Shalom, 696. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol l'teikut elai l'ser rishit shelo asano v'yarazot. Shehonat hashamayim v'yosed haaretz Moshe v'yikra l'shamayim. Al kenaka ve'lachadon Eloheinu li'ot mehei Rabbi Tiferet uzecha. Kakatu b'Torah techanayim loch le'olam v'ed v'nemar v'hayya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz bayom ahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. If we can have at least proof that Diane is listening in and one other back rack so that we have a minion. We have two other back racks.
One second.
Okay.
Elliot's right here. He could hear.
Okay, great. Is anyone on this Zoom saying Kaddish and obligated to say Kaddish or wants to lead, or should I do it? I don't think there's anyone saying Kaddish. Okay, so I will lead. And maybe Larry, if you want to be my echo. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabah.
Amen.
Amen. Bi'alma dirach hirutei, bi'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'izman kari v'yimeru. Amen.
Amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach le'olam le'olam maya.
Yehei shemei rabba mevorach le'olam le'olam maya. Yibarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalel shemei dekudasha brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'yimeru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom min ramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
Amen.
This is my 21st year as a rabbi, and I am known amongst my colleagues as like a liturgical dude. Like I love the luach. I don't always get things perfectly, but I love the specificity and the precision of the davening calendar. This is the first time in my career that I led services and left out an Amidah. I am mortified. So I guess when you're like not really gathering as a minion and no one can say it quickly enough, hey Rabbi, wait, it can happen. But I really feel terrible. So
this is how stupid I am. I noticed it, but I didn't want to say anything because maybe I didn't know what I was talking about.
Actually, on the first Shabbat after Tisha B'Av, if there are fewer than 14 people, you don't say the Amidah. Everybody knows that.
Yeah,
No, just a mistake. Let me bring some Havdalah stuff, and we'll end Shabbat together.
As an explanation, whoever made the schedule, I think, has made a mistake because I didn't start the service early enough. Shabbat is ending. This is the time of year when we're speeding through the changing the calendar, the clock, and we didn't have the normal amount of time that you've had between the start of the services and Havdalah.
You might be right. It could be that there was just a glitch in the system and we didn't catch it. So we'll look into that for next time because we certainly want to give time for the Amidah next week and not to have this be rushed. So my apologies, folks.
Rabbi.
Yes, sir.
Yasher Koach on the Torah reading. Very long and accurate you were.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting. I notice this occasionally that the weekday Torah readings for the book of Dvarim are in general much longer than throughout the rest of the Torah. The first aliyot of Dvarim Parshas are long, and there are some Torah readings that are even longer than the. That was closed. Thank God. That are really long readings. Like you can learn the weekday reading for a Breshit, Shmod, Vayikra, and Bamidbar Parsha pretty easily. But Dvarim are longer, and Ekev itself is I think one of the longest of the opening aliyot. Hinei el Yeshuati yaftach velo efchad ki aziv ezimrad yad Adonai vayehili lishua ushavtemayim besason mimaynei Yeshua L'Adonai Yeshua Alamcha berchatecha sela Adonai tzvaot imanu Miskav lanu Elohei Yaakov sela Adonai tzvaot Ashrei Adam boteach bach Adonai Yoshia Hamelech Yaneinu V'yom Koreinu La Yehudim Haita Ora Vesimcha Vesason V'yakar Kein Tielanu Kos Yeshuot Esa Uv'shem Adonai Ekra Yainanai Yananai Nai Yainanai Yananai Nai Baruch Atah Adonai Mochalam Borei Pri Agafen Baruch Atah Adonai Mochalam Borei Minei Besamim Baruch Atah Adonai Mochalam Borei Miorei Ha'esh Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Mochalam Avdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol Ben L'Choshek Ben Yisrael Yom Yom HaShishi L'Sheshet Yimei HaMaseh Baruch Atah Adonai HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol HaMavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol Chatoteinu Yimcho Zareinu b'chaspeinu yarbe kacho v'kahakochavim balayla. Zareinu b'chaspeinu yarbe kacho v'kahakochavim balayla. Shavua Tov, everyone. You probably all have time to go on to the Zoom out if you want. It'll probably be over the time I get home. But tell them I say hello, everybody. Yeshkoach to Rachel, our intern, for her drash this morning. Have a good week. See you all later.
Yeah.
Rabbi, when did you start teaching the Rashi class in Monroe?
October of 2000.
Okay, because I have to figure out how long I've got to live till we get to this pasuk in your Rashi class, because I really want to talk about this pasuk sometime.
I was hoping you were going to chime in. So write me up something. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
They're thoughts about thoughts, because I have to think about it. From the very beginning, from what you said about Pesalim Elohehem, and the whole idea of, both in Hebrew and in translation into English, the way in which we relate to the word God, G-O-D, or Elim, is by itself. And the fact that we attribute that to the Pesalim is, for me, absolutely intriguing. And the connection here of the two of the commandments against images and against coveting and putting them together. I'm sure that people have written about that.
Yes.
And how they come together. And then there's the whole, you mentioned the economics, but it's more psychology or behavioral economics of how people relate to things in this. So it seems to me that there's more than 15 minutes worth of material here.
Absolutely. By the way, Larry, in case I never get it unburied in my email, a half response to your Nachem question. I was once in a very wonderful Q&A session with Rabbi Riskin when I was studying at Yeshivat HaMiftar, and some of the students were asking him about what do you do when you come across lines in the tefillah that you don't believe? What do you do with them? And Rabbi Riskin's first response was, the tradition wins. You change your thinking about what the words mean rather than just willy-nilly deciding what you will or will not pray, because otherwise pretty soon the liturgy will be unrecognizable. And I kind of actually hewed at that idea. But they really pushed him. And he basically said at the end, don't quote me on this, but here I am quoting him on this. He said that when he gets to the Nachem paragraph on Tisha B'Av, he refuses to say it in the present tense, even though the traditional version of the Nachem paragraph is in the present tense, because to Riskin, Yerushalayim is not chareva. It's not destroyed. It's the opposite thereof. So he changed liturgy, which is not something that Orthodox rabbis do or admit to doing all the time. And he says the Nachem paragraph, shechareva haita, that was then destroyed, because he believes that you cannot lie in prayer, that if it's a lie, it's not prayer. So how could he say something he didn't believe to be true? And I thought it was an interesting window into when push comes to shove, what do you do when you confront liturgy that there's no way to darshan it around? There's no way to say, no, it doesn't mean this, it means that. No, it means this. Can I still say it? So I say I do say the Nachem. I believe that the Nachem in the Sim Shalom.
Yeah, the Sim Shalom has changed. The Sim
into the past tense.
Yes.
Yeah. And what did Galinkin say al regel achad? I didn't get to the shiur.
There's another version in V'ani Tefilati. If you have that, if not, I can copy the page and send it to you.
I do have it.
The Hebrew version. There's actually two different versions of the Siddur, but it's the yellow gold covered one, and that is actually much changed. It has like an introductory several lines. Since it's only Hebrew, it's not translated, so I can't give you a translation. But I did study it a little bit, and that's the one I used this Tisha B'Av. Which, by the way, this Tisha B'Av was the second most meaningful Tisha B'Av that we've ever had.
Wow.
Diane agrees.
What was the first?
When we were in sabbatical in Israel, our first time in Israel.
The thing that made Aliyah.
Yeah.
Wow.
That more than anything, almost more than anything else, kept calling us back to Israel.
Wow. It was an interesting Tisha B'Av for me, too. I found that the learning and the gathering on Zoom with the communities at the end of Tisha B'Av was beautiful. I got to tell you, Echai Yashva Badad Ha'ir Abatiyah, to say those words on the Ziering field in an empty campus was a real ache. It was like both wonderful to be able to be there at least with that number of people, but when you think of how our campus bustles, Rabat Yam, and how it is badad, bodedet, desolate, not because someone has destroyed it, but because we can't access it, I was overwhelmed for a moment with this is not the same as the destruction of the Jerusalem, God forbid, but there was something immediate about how a prophet once described a bustling Jewish city totally emptied out. Strange times we're living through.
Very strange times.
All right, Shavua Tov, good vach.
Shavua Tov, all the best.